SummerSlam 1988. Thank you, Nick Opalewski, for the what do you call it? Request. My brain still needs to wake up a little. It took place on August 29th, 1988 at Madison Square Garden, and on the call were Gorilla Monsoon and superstar Billy Graham, whom we recently lost. So, now they're both gone. Okay. The British Bulldogs versus the Rougeau brothers in a time limit draw. It was actually a very good match. Ken Patera versus Bad News Brown. Bad News Brown won. Nothing to write home about. Junkyard Dog versus Rick Rude. Rude won by disqualification. Jake Roberts came in because when Rude was on the top rope, he pulled down his JYD tights to show Cheryl Roberts' tights. Now, if you're not familiar, at the time, Rude and Roberts were feuding because Rude tried to give the Rude Awakening to Roberts' wife at the time, Cheryl. So, on Superstars of Wrestling, or one of those shows. And it's been a long time. And they've been feuding ever since. The Powers of Pain versus the Bolsheviks. The Bolsheviks were Boris Zumhoff and Nikolai Volkov. I've always been somewhat partial to Nikolai. Boris Zumhoff is not Russian. I can't remember his name at the present moment, but Powers of Pain won, and believe it or not, the Powers of Pain were actually baby faces at the time, which blew my mind. But anyway, Don Morocco versus Dino Bravo. Don Morocco was a baby face, which again blew my mind. Dino Bravo won. Again, it wasn't anything to write home about. Don Morocco is capable of having the best match on the card, on any card. Or was back then. He's kind of old now. But, sorry, Rock. Yes, guys, he was the original. Well, the original. Now, okay. Now, when everybody thinks of The Rock, they think of The Rock. But actually, the original Rock was Ole Anderson. And about the same time, maybe shortly after, Don Morocco was also The Rock. So, having to do with their, I don't know why they called Ole that. Maybe because he was sturdy as a rock. With Morocco, it was his physique. He was built like a mountain. For the tag titles, you got Demolition versus the Hart Foundation. This was after Jimmy Hart turned on the Hart Foundation and went with Demolition. Demolition won because they used a megaphone to smack, I believe it was Brett, over the head. Coco Beware versus, and that was actually a really decent match. Coco Beware versus Big Boss Man. Boss Man won. Nothing to write home about. I mean, it was better than a lot of the matches, but it still wasn't terrific, you know? the Intercontinental title, the Honky Tonk Man was supposed to face Brutus Beefcake, but Ron Bass had taken the spur to Brutus Beefcake's head. And they showed the footage. I remember the footage so clearly at the time. And they're like, and so they put the X, and it says censored, this big red X over it, so you can't see the blood. It's like, okay. We knew what Ron Bass was doing. I was 14 years old. I wasn't an idiot. But anyway, and I don't think any of us were. But for television, they had to do that. Now it's in the last sort of period where they even allowed blood. So instead of facing him, and like I said, I remember that segment like it was yesterday. Well, first he choked him with his whip that he calls Miss Bessie. Ron Bass didn't stay in the World Wrestling Federation very long. He just wasn't a fit. He was a tough guy. You know, he just wasn't a fit for them. So the Honky Tonk Man was all, I don't care who they put in to replace him, I'll beat him, I'm the greatest Intercontinental Heavyweight Champion of all time, and so out comes the Ultimate Warrior. And that's where he won his first title. In about, well, the 3 seconds basically that it takes to count the pinfall. Jake the Snake Roberts versus the Mighty Hercules. Roberts won with a DDT. It was actually a really good match. The Mega Powers versus the Mega Bucks. Okay, Chester Ventura was the special guest referee. The Mega Powers were Randy Savage and Hulk Hogan, with Miss Elizabeth in their corner. The Mega Bucks were Ted DiBiase and Andre the Giant, brought together by Bobby Heenan. And they came out on the Brother Love show and like stuffed Jesse Ventura's inside pocket with money. The Mega Powers won. And it was funny. Jesse he hit the mat twice, and then he's like, "Oh, I want to do this." And Randy Savage pushed his hand down. Then he rang the bell. Well, he pointed for the bell to ring. Trying to think. So he didn't have a choice. I have a few notes. Matilda was with the Bulldogs. When Matilda stopped coming out, which I believe after Dynamite left, people asked about it. And it was revealed that Matilda retired, went home, and had babies. Now, for those of you not familiar and you don't know who the heck Matilda is, or probably was, she was an English Bulldog. She used to come out with the British Bulldogs. She would sit, very well behaved, she would sit at ringside, but she would sit up on the cameraman's box. There's this box that's level with the ring for a cameraman to stand on. And that's where she would sit. And she would sit through the whole match. She would watch. She would look around. She was the most well-trained, well-behaved dog. She was a British Bulldog. And she retired. She went home. She had puppies. I guess she had award-winning puppies. Show puppies. I guess she had a couple of litters. Then she was completely retired. So that's what Matilda did. I would imagine that Matilda is probably no longer with us, since 1988 was 35 years ago. And I talked about the fact that they showed the whole thing with Ron Bass and Beefcake. And it was great to see late referee Tim White. He reffed quite a few of the matches. Sorry. Somebody came out with Powers of Pain and they called him the Baron, but you couldn't really. He was wearing a big hood, oversized hood, and he had like a white partial mask, and I couldn't see who it was. I'm like, who is that? So I went and looked it up. It was Baron von Raschke. He didn't last long. And Brother Love had Hacksaw Jim Duggan on the Brother Love show. And I looked at the TV and he says, "I love you." And my mother used to tease me and say, "You're your stepfather." Just jokingly. So when he said, "I love you," I looked at the screen and I said, "I loathe you." And actually his interaction with Hacksaw was incredible. I loved it. Oh my goodness, excuse me. So, trying to think. Said we were going to take a walk. Not sure. Looking outside. It's not raining or anything. Yes, we are. Because I know where we're going to go. At least attempt to go. So, let's get our crap together and go. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I would probably give this event overall a B+. My favorite match on the event? Hard to say. Let's see. Probably at the time limit draw with the Bulldogs is right up there. The demolition match was great. I'm not usually into big guy matches. I don't like the lumbering power. Although demolition could move pretty well. Remember their theme song from the WWF The Album? Here comes the demolition, the axe and the smasher. Walking destruction, demolition. So, anyway, thank you for joining me. God bless you, and I'll see you in a little bit. Bye, guys. Please subscribe. Thank you.